When I was a young man, my prized possession was a tatty copy of the Osborne Book of Spying, which was an instruction manual for under-12s wishing to become international agents of espionage. It told you how to make invisible ink, throw an enemy agent off your trail, and most importantly, encode secret messages to your brother so your parents couldn't read them. There's still a little bit of me that wants to be a spy. I know it's never going to happen, but when this whole Mossad forging Australian passports, allegedly, thing came up this week, I thought I could indulge my private spying fantasies by at least talking about spies, and particularly the wonderfully named Mossad. On the line, I have Dr. Dvir Abramovich, who is Director of the Centre for Jewish History and Culture at the University of Melbourne, where he teaches a course in the history of the Arab-Israeli conflict. And he knows a bit about Mossad. He's on the line. Hello, Dvir. How are you?
Good morning, Ellen. I'm well. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you very much for talking to us. Now, firstly, what does the name Mossad mean?
Well, the Mossad means it's, in a sense, short for the Institution for Intelligence and Special Assignments. Its current motto is taken from the Book of Proverbs, quite fittingly, I think, chapter 11, verse 14. Says, "For lack of guidance a nation falls, but many advisors make victory sure." And it's actually a new one, because the previous one, also taken from the Book of Proverbs, underlines, in a sense, the same message. And it says, "For waging war, you need guidance, and for victory, many advisors." So the idea here is that in order to achieve victory, what a nation needs is knowledge. And it's interesting that one of the guiding principles for the Mossad was taken from a statement by a German-born Jewish scientist called Charles Steinmetz. And he came up with a saying that there will come an age of small and independent nations whose first line of defense will be knowledge. And it's always been acknowledged that Israel, more than artillery, more than fighters, more than the high-speed seacraft that it has, it relies for its military strength on accurate and comprehensive knowledge of its enemy's activities. And the Mossad has been crucial in that.
When and why was the Mossad founded?
Well, you look at Wikipedia, and unfortunately one of the things that happens is that it provides, in a sense, the wrong information. A quick history lesson, if I may. David Ben-Gurion, who was Israel's first prime minister and a defense minister, knew and realized that Israel is surrounded by nations which are hostile. So from the very beginning, even in the chaotic days of the War of Independence in 1948, he knew that it would be a necessity for maintaining a strong and efficient intelligence service to have something such as the Mossad. And he set up 5 different branches. And it was quite confusing. And in 1951, he decided to set up the Mossad, which would be the major branch of the intelligence community. And its primary task in 1951 was to gather and analyze information abroad in any area that might be of interest to Israel. But, and that's an important but, he recognized that the Mossad would need to execute its task in a multitude of difficult and dangerous activities. So he included the phrase special assignments in its official title, realizing that the Mossad would have to perform any unusual operations outside of Israel. And he knew that in Israel's struggle for survival, the Mossad would be one of the most valuable weapons it has. And it's been true.
What are the other intelligence organizations in Israel? Because the Mossad is not the only one, is it?
No. The Mossad, there are 2 main ones, and I'll talk very quickly about them. The first one is called Shabak, which is the General Security Services, and it is responsible for Israel's internal security. It works, of course, with the Mossad, and it's one of Israel's 3 major organizations. The second one is called Shabak, it's called Amman, and that's Israel's military intelligence service. So there are 3 main organizations, the Shabak, Amman, and the Mossad.
Now, within the Mossad, the little that I know about it, there are various departments handling, obviously, different aspects of the Mossad's work. Can you just briefly tell us about those different departments and what they do?
Sure. There's about 6 or 7 different ones. I'll talk about the 3 main ones because I think for your listeners they would be the most interesting. The first one is called TEVEL, which means global, and it's the division which works with other intelligence services, ASIO, the CIA. It exchanges information. It also has a very important task in developing diplomatic relations with those countries that Israel does not have official diplomatic ties. The second one is called Tzomet, which means crossroads, and it manages the various networks of Mossad agents around the world. And the third one, and I guess the most notorious or famous one, is called Masada, which of course is a reference to the biblical story of Masada, of those Jewish fighters who decided to commit suicide rather than fall hostage. And it was formerly known as Caesarea, and that is the Special Operations Department. It has squads that are sent on overseas missions on, for example, capturing rogue agents or engaging in assassinations. So hit teams or hit squadrons. They are the 3 main ones.
I am speaking with Dr. Dvir Abramovich, who is the director of the Centre for Jewish History and Culture at the University of Melbourne, who teaches a course in the history of the Arab-Israeli conflict. And we are speaking about Mossad because obviously they have been in the news in the last week, and I wanted to find out all about them. Now, you talked about the department that goes out and assassinates people and brings in rogue agents and does stuff like that. I imagine they would have been the ones involved in some of the most famous of Mossad's missions. Can you tell us about some of the more famous missions that Mossad has been involved in? And I suppose within this, there would be missions that it's never been confirmed that Mossad were involved in.
Of course, and it's ironic, or perhaps it's not ironic, that the Mossad does all it can to avoid publicity. Most of its missions, equally or more dangerous than the hit team operations, are concerned with genuine intelligence works and are not publicized. So it's only when the Mossad, fails that it attracts the most attention, or when it is triumphant. Some of the most famous ones, I guess, would be, I think I'll talk about the first one, which is Eli Cohen. And Eli Cohen wasn't to do with hit team, but Eli Cohen was an Israeli agent who was executed on the 18th of May 1965 after being discovered by the Syrians. And it's a fascinating tale because he really became one of the master spies of Israel, and many claim that he was partially responsible for Israel's victory in the Six-Day War. And he came to Syria. He befriended some of the most influential political and businessmen in Syria, and he was able to convey crucial information about Syrian positions in the Golan Heights and connections that Syria had with Palestinian terrorist organizations. Unfortunately, he was caught. He was publicly executed, and until today, the Syrians refused to return his body. Another important operation which I can talk about is the Bluebird legend, as it's been called. It's called Operation Diamond. And in 1966, an Iraqi fighter pilot flew a MiG-21 jet to Israel. And it was considered at that time the number one fighter plane during the Cold War. And Captain Munir Redfa, the Iraqi fighter pilot who flew the jet, said that he decided to defect because of the remorse and guilt he felt over attacking Kurdish villages. But in fact, we now know that it was a comprehensive and bold Mossad-initiated operation, which was named Operation Diamond.
And so when they got the MiG back to Israel, it was obviously about dismantling it and gaining the technology. But I imagine that as part of that, it would have been about making sure that the Russians knew that they had that technology.
That's right. That's absolutely right. In Israel, we should say that the Israeli Mossad works very closely with all spy agencies. And it's interesting, we talk about operations. This week, in effect, May 11th, this month, marks the 50th anniversary of the discovering and the capturing of the Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann. It became a priority for David Ben-Gurion, Israel's prime minister, to capture those Nazi criminals and to bring them to justice. And the Mossad discovered that Eichmann was living in Argentina under the name of Ricardo Clement. And it was a very difficult operation. They were operating, obviously, on sovereign land. And they set up an apartment. They kept watching him. And he was captured by a team of agents and smuggled to Israel, dressed up as an El Al pilot. And when he was in Israel, he was tried and executed. And in essence, we had the same situation that we have now, where the Argentinian government was furious that Israel, in a sense, violated its sovereignty and came onto its territory and captured Eichmann.
Another mission that they were involved in, which I only know the name of, which was Operation Solomon, was also about bringing a large amount of people to Israel, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. Operation Solomon was part of another operation, which was called Operation Moses. Operation Solomon was quite an incredible feat. More than 14,000 Ethiopian Jews in the space of 34 hours and on 30 planes were brought from the Sudan to Israel. And the Mossad was instrumental in organizing the different locations for them to be picked up. It was a follow-up to Operation Moses, which again was a military operation in 1984, in which again thousands of Ethiopian Jews were brought to Israel. So the Mossad not only works in a sense by going into other countries, it's also about fostering and developing relationships and preparing the ground. I should mention, by the way, as we speak, Operation Wrath of God, because that's in a sense one of the most famous ones, and it was popularized by Steven Spielberg's film Munich. And after the 1972 massacre of 11 Israeli athletes at Munich, the Munich Olympics, Prime Minister Golda Meir gave the order to hunt down the Black September group, which was responsible. And a hit team, what's called a Kidon, a bayonet team, was sent, and 11 Palestinian terrorists were eliminated in that particular operation. And it's, in a sense, as I said, there have been several films which have depicted the operations in Europe. It was an important one because it sent a very clear message that the long arm of Israeli justice will reach out anywhere and where Israelis are either in danger or Israelis are being killed.
I am speaking with Dr. Dvir Abramovich, who is the director of the Centre for Jewish History and Culture at the University of Melbourne, and we are talking about Mossad. Now, those are Mossad missions that worked out well. Have there been Mossad missions, and you mentioned this before, that often we only hear about Mossad when things fail. Has there been one quite spectacular failure that Mossad has been involved in?
Yes, I'll talk about two very quickly. The first one is called the Lillehammer Affair. And what happened was that while pursuing and hunting down those responsible for the Munich massacre, the Israeli Mossad agents mistakenly killed a man called Ahmad Bouchiki in 1973. He was an Algerian-born Moroccan citizen working as a waiter in Lillehammer, Norway. And he was shot by mistake. They thought that they actually identified Ali Hassan Salameh, the Red Prince, who was one of the leaders of the Black September. He was in 1979 eventually killed by a car bomb. And the Israeli agents were caught and were sentenced for various terms in jail. The second botched operation was the attempted assassination of Khaled Mashal. Khaled Mashal is the head of the military unit of Hamas, and this happened in September 1997 in Jordan. It's quite an extraordinary tale. The team was following him, and they had an injection. They were going to inject him with poison, which, apparently any contact with the skin would have led to death. But what they weren't aware was that Mashal had his daughter with him in the car. And she opened the door and ran towards him, and he turned his head and the poison was actually injected into his ear. And the Mossad agents were caught, and after discussions between Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at that time and Prince Abdullah of Jordan, Israel agreed to provide the antidote. So there have been, in a sense, screw-ups, but we don't hear about them often.
Now, Dvir, one final question before I let you go, and thank you so much for coming on the show and telling us about Mossad. It's been fascinating. How do we know so much about Mossad? Because I would imagine that they want to keep themselves as secretive as humanly possible, but we do seem to know quite a bit. Or do we? Is it just an impression that we are allowed to have?
That's a very good question. There's been a cottage industry of books coming out. People are attracted to the mystery and to, in a sense, the kind of international esteem that the organization is held at. And I understand that after the hit on the Hamas leader in Dubai, there have been T-shirts with the agency's logo, which are selling out in Israel. We know a little because there have been some very good books that have come out, books by people like Yossi Melman, Imperfect Spies, who's a very good scholar. But I think one of the reasons that we know more about the operation, about the organization, is that in May 2004, it broke with tradition, and it actually opened a website. The reason was to attract potential recruits, and in 2010, as I understand, it's getting something like 900,000 hits a month. And if you go into the website, you see that it's very smart, it's very clean, but it's also very simple. There's a statement about what the operation is, and it invites people to actually submit their applications. I'm not sure exactly what you need to become a Mossad agent. I'm not sure what qualifications. I'm sure it's more than just a BA at the university.
They've never tried to recruit you?
They never tried to recruit me. I think I'm simply too boring and don't have the requisite skills. I think I'll stick to my day job.
Dr. Dvir Abramovich, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a great pleasure to talk to you and very interesting to hear about all about Mossad. I hope you have a lovely Sunday, and again, thank you for chatting with us.
Thanks, Alan. Appreciate the opportunity.
That was Dr. Dvir Abramovich, who is the